Well, good morning, Rivers United Church. It's good to see you out here on a dreary, rainy Sunday morning. So good to have you. If you're here for the first time, we want to extend a warm welcome to you. We are so glad that you're here. One of the easiest ways you can learn about Rivers United Church is to go to our website, which is riversunited.church. Another way to connect with us is something we have called a connection card. And you'll find that behind the seat pocket, in the pocket. And maybe you have a question, a comment, a prayer request, let us know. Fill that card out. And we have some boxes at the doorways called connection boxes. You can put those in there, and someone would be happy to get back with you. There's also a giving envelope right next to that. If you came here today predetermined to give to Rivers United Church, first of all, thank you so much for your generosity, which allows us to minister to others, and we're just so grateful for that. You can use that giving envelope if you want to for your offering, and you can pop it in those boxes as well. You can also give online, and you can text to give. One of the things we always say is we don't pass the plate here. We really want giving to be coming from your own heart, and we really want much more for you than we want from you. And so also, if you're here as a guest today, please don't think we're asking you for money. We want this gift to be a service to you. Also wanted to let you know about some upcoming events, especially for our Rapid Impact youth. Coming up Saturday, we are going to have an outing for our youth where they're going to eat lunch at Metro Diner and then go ice skating at Chilled Ponds. There's information in our weekly about that. You can register right there. And I know that they want you to register by Wednesday. So if you have youth that are planning to attend, go ahead and maybe even register today just so you get that done. That's going to be a fun time for the youth. And then after our second service, after worship, in our second service, our youth are going to be gathering in the cafe today. So if you know any youth, we'd love to have them a part of that as well. And then lastly, coming up here in less than 2 weeks is a fun event we have called Married Life Live. We are very excited about it. A lot of great things happening. Registration's coming up very soon. So if you're planning to go to Married Life Live, there's going to be fun and games and laughter and encouragement. It's going to be just a great night. We would really encourage you to come. In fact, I want to show you a little quick video about the event right here.
Hello, Rivers United Church. This is Doug and Sanji Gregory. Just wanted to say how excited we are to join you all on February 24th for Married Life Live. I know it's going to be a wonderful event. I just want to say thank you, and we'll see you then.
I was going to come up sooner, but I was kind of like, you know what? You guys were really enjoying that, so there you go. Can you guess what we're going to talk about today? It's always nice to have a theme song, you know. Today we're going to talk about family. And I want to take just a moment to thank Pastor Dave Clefman for kicking off this series last Sunday. So if you missed that, he talked about, thank you very much, Dave. That was awesome. And it is a must-hear message about marriage. So if you missed that, please go back and listen to it. It's on our website and YouTube channel, and you can check that out for yourself, but it is a must-hear message. Today, we're going to continue that series talking about a little bit about what I was doing last Sunday. So Dave gave me the day off last Sunday, so that was kind of nice, and it gave me a chance to spend some time with my son. And so there's a little bit of what we did. We had some really good conditions at Snowshoe, and we came back in one piece, so that's always a good sign. And we got to eat some food and have some, it was a great experience, which is really what I want to talk a little bit about today. Today I want to talk about kids. How can we win with our kids, both when they're small and when they're big, and we're all at different stages? But there is a cultural trend that I believe we have to overcome. And whether you believe it or not, we are a product of our culture. If you don't believe that, take a look at how we live and how other cultures live and how odd it is and how much somebody would stand out even if they eat a different way. It's amazing how we're a product of our culture. But there's a cultural trend that I believe that we have to overcome. So the principle we're going to talk about today is countercultural. But I got to tell you something, if we don't get this, it is going to make us or break us. It's going to bless us or curse us. And the cultural trend is this. In fact, I'd love for you to write it down. I'd love for you to take some notes today, because I got a feeling whether you have biological kids or not, whether your kids are grown or not, you're going to need this information for, I believe this is for everybody. The trend that I see is this, is that we make our kids experience rich, but relationship poor. Experience rich, which is kind of strange for me to say when I just explained me and my son had a great experience. So let me be clear about something. I don't mean to say that experiences are bad, that we give our kids good experience. There's nothing wrong with that. But what I'm saying is this: when it becomes at the expense of relationships, when experiences become the goal and we don't focus in on the relationship. And I know that we mean well. You know, I could have came up here today and say, what we really need to do is love our kids. But I don't think that goes without saying. I actually haven't met anybody that comes here that would say, I don't love my kids. I believe that they do. But sometimes we don't know how. And the way we choose to love them and the thing we choose to invest in is a very cultural thing for us, but yet I tell you, it's not taking us to the place we think it's taking us to. That we think that experiences will provide more for them, that we want them to have things. Here's how we kind of think about it. I want them to have advantages that I didn't have. Is that true? I want them not to have to struggle like I did. And we think that providing an experience, providing colleges, providing things for them, providing all kinds of experiences is going to get there. But I got to tell you something, it's not providing what we think it will. If you want one example, this is not from a Christian book, but it's a book from the 90s that I have found that the principles in it, even though times have changed, are just as valuable today as it was back then. There's a book called The Millionaire Next Door. Has anybody ever read that? If you haven't, it's a really amazing book. It was not written by a millionaire. It was written by a guy who, at the time, interviewed deca-millionaires, meaning people that had $10 million of net worth plus. So today, I don't know how much that would be with inflation, right? And he's talked about wealth building, and that was his only purpose. So this is not a spiritual book. It wasn't him coming to a conclusion. In fact, a lot of the book, he came to conclusions about how you build wealth that were totally different than what anybody ever thought. But one of the number one things that kept people from building wealth? Parents that gave them wealth. That the number one thing that helped people not create wealth, it seems so odd, doesn't it? Like you would think that parents that supplemented their kids, parents that gave their kids money, but they found that the kids that were given nothing actually built more wealth than the kids that were given a lot. Can I tell you something today? Be careful that you're not making your kids experience rich, because we don't care about wealth in here, not physical wealth, although that's a piece of it. We're talking about what's most important in their life. That what is going to make or break your kids, the most important thing in their life that they can go, what is going to make them a success or not, is their ability to form good relationships. That's a fact. We know that in every environment. You would know that at your work. Somebody that can't form good relationships or people skills, they could be the most skilled person, yet they're not going to go very far, right? In your marriages, the things that make the most difference. In fact, I'll tell you, I preached a funeral coming back off this trip. And the biggest thing that I say almost at every funeral, you know what? In the end, relationships are all that matter. Your relationship with God, your relationship with people. And I always say at the end of the funeral, hey, it's not just in the end that it matters. It just shows up in the end. Today we're going to talk about how can we make sure that we're doing that? How can we make sure we give our kids the most important thing? I know you love them. I know that the reason why you want to give them these experiences, but when the experiences become the goal, I got to tell you, we're going to look back over our life and say, man, we didn't invest in the right thing. Is this worth some of our time? Let's take a look at Ephesians chapter. Today we're going to start with Ephesians chapter 6. Ephesians chapter 6 and verse 1. If you want to know anything about relationships, the book of Ephesians is a great snapshot in Ephesians chapter 5, which I believe Dave covered some last week, and Ephesians chapter 6. Ephesians chapter 6 says this about our children. It says, children, obey your parents in the Lord, for this is right. It goes on to say, honor your father and your mother, which is the first commandment with a promise, so that it may go well with you and you may enjoy long life on the earth. I will tell you this, is that this is what we want for our kids. We want our kids to obey us, is that right? We want our kids to have long life on the earth and have a good life. And he's about to tell us one thing that we can do, and it's found here in this verse, verse 4. It says, fathers, do not exasperate your children. Instead, bring them up in the training and the instruction of the Lord. Do not exasperate. That's kind of a good word, right? And it actually says, dads, right? Now, I want to be clear about something. It doesn't mean just dads, okay? Moms, don't exasperate your children. Moms can exasperate too. But it means especially dads. So if you're a dad, it's saying, hey, wake up, right? Because dads oftentimes, and especially where we live, and I think in their culture too, it was kind of like, hey, moms kind of do the kid thing, and then dads just, right? And it's saying, dads, this is for you too, especially dads, because we can tend to exasperate. Does everybody know what the word exasperate means? I actually have a definition, so this might help you. Exasperate means to irritate and to frustrate intensely. Let me ask you a question. Have you been exasperated? I know as a dad, it's fun to be irritating sometimes. I do that to my son all the time, but anyway. But all joking aside, what it means is this, is not understanding why. That's what it means. It means, hey, I'm exasperated, I'm frustrated because I don't know how to win. I feel like you tell me things or you punish me, right? You ever had that as a kid where it's like your parents punish you for something and you're like, I have no earthly clue what they want. It's like I have to guess what irritates them, or I'm walking on eggshells and I'm trying to figure it out. Maybe you see that at your work and it's exasperating when you go, hey, I'm trying to do the right thing and I'm following what I think they want, and then all of a sudden they change everything and they're really super mad, and you're like, that's exasperation. That makes me exasperated. And what exasperates kid is this, is when you use the fact, hey, I'm bigger and I have a position, right? My size and my position is the reason why you will do what I tell you to do, right? Did you grow up that way? Well, why do I need to do this? Because, right? Is that a good answer? Because I said so, right? Because I'm Big Dad and I can make you, right? I'm Big Mama. Okay, we're not going to go there. We'll stop there right now. Sorry. I didn't think that one through. Okay. Now, let me pause here and just say, there's nothing wrong with having size and position. Because I've seen a trend that shifts, and I've seen sometimes people will use a message like today, and they'll be applying this, and a piece of it applies when you have little kids. So, but can I help you with something? When they're little, you need to use size and position, okay? You need to say, because I told you to, right? I don't have time to explain it. You need to do what I say right now because I am bigger than you and you should be scared of me, okay? And some people are scared to do that. I've seen parents negotiating with their small children, right? I mean, kids that are not even in kindergarten yet. Hey, to cross the road, you have choices, and now we're sitting here dialoguing and negotiating with the kid. You need to say, hey, you need to listen to me now. And they need to have enough fear to listen to you now. And if you need help with that, because I get it. Sometimes we don't like to do that, or maybe you were raised a certain way, or maybe it was like, hey, you saw abusive, and so you go, hey, I want my kids not to feel that way. I don't want them to be afraid. But it's okay to use size and position when they're little. What I'm talking about is this, is that has to transition into not control, but influence. Have you done that? Or are you using size and position long after it's effective? By the way, it's eroding your relationship. And when you need influence most, and believe me when I tell you, you will, there will come a time when you need influence. You may want to lean into this because you have to transition. You see, here's what I think, and you can write this down if you want to because I'm wrestling with it just like you. We compensate for our under-involvement by overreacting. We overcompensate, right? We overreact because of our under-involvement. Life is busy, life is difficult, and there's challenges. And so here's what I see. We can go one way or the other on this pendulum. We can over-discipline or we can under-discipline. You know, the over-discipliner? It's like we haven't disciplined our whole life, but I'm going to change this behavior and I'm going to do it now because I'm Big Dad, and if you don't like what I have to say, well, I can take you out and then I can make more, right? I mean, but we don't think of it that way, but we go, I'm going to change it and I'm mad and you're not going to come up against me. And so therefore, you're doing this long after it was effective. And so what we do, we're harsh and we think that'll change it. Or I see another trend. We under-discipline. We feel guilty for some of the things we did, or maybe we messed up in our lives, or maybe it's a second marriage, or maybe the whole thing is super messy. And so therefore, what we do is we think, hey, I don't want to be harsh, so I just won't discipline at all, or I'll just give them what they want. And then I start to go, hey, let me be on your side, because there's no friend like those of us that have a camaraderie of vilification. Do you know what I'm talking about with that? That if somebody's against my kid or somebody corrects my child, right? Because then kids that are undisciplined are then inflicted on teachers. And I know we got some teachers in the room, right? And so we send our kid to them, and then when they correct our kid, then little Johnny, I don't like that. My name's John, so I'm not going to go there. So little Mikey, you like Mikey? Or little Sally. Is Sally in the room? I can talk about her while she's not here, all right? Little Sally goes into, little Mikey goes into class and gets in trouble. And then the parents come in with a lawyer, right? How dare you correct him, right? You send a little hellion to them, and they're trying to correct them and help them, and you're not helping your kid. If that's the way you're going to do, you better hire a lawyer for a very long time, because eventually they're going to run up against the law, and it's everybody else's fault, and you think you're supporting them while you under-disciplined them because of your guilt of whatever happened. Can I tell you something? Relationships take time, but we're doing it because of our under-involvement. What it actually says to do is this, and let me just pause here and say this. If you're part of a step family where family is blended, and then you got outside influences where you have to deal with somebody else that maybe is not even on the same page with that, please come see us. We got some resources for you because it's tough to navigate. I don't mean to make this a soundbite. This is what church is all about, and we're going to talk more about that next Sunday, but I want to make sure you know we do have some resources, and there's a whole ministry from Family Life called Wise Step Families, I believe it's called, and we can help you with some of that. And it's helped some of our families that have navigated through it, and some of those kids are grown today, but we're all in this together. It says this, don't exasperate them, instead bring them up in the training and the instruction of the Lord. When I was a kid, they used King James, so they said admonishment, right? What that meant is beat your kid, or I'm just playing. I don't know. But the word doesn't actually mean that. You know what it means? It means to nurture them. It means to be a nurturer, to guide them, to coach them. A coach, it doesn't mean you just tell them what they want to hear, right? That's why I was telling you about the two pendulums. Over-discipline, harsh, abusive. Under-discipline, equally, honestly, is abusive because you don't tell them. They're my buddy. They don't need a buddy. They need a parent. They need somebody that's there for them no matter what. And a coach is on your side, but oftentimes a coach will tell you things you don't want to hear because a coach understands and a guide understands that life is connected like a path, and we're looking down the path and we're going, if you continue this behavior, it's not going to help. But the older they get, you can't draw on, I'm big mom, I'm big dad. You have to draw on the influence you built. Can I tell you why? Because you can't force them when they're older. You won't be there. You're not going to be there when they make the most important decisions of their life. They will be without you, and if you haven't built influence, it won't work. So, how do we do this? How do we transition? I want to give you some things. I want to give you 3 things 3 questions to ask yourself as a parent. Now, the material I'm using today is not original with me. In fact, that would be scary if it was, because I'm preaching with you today. I've got a young adult son, and I'm struggling just like everybody else, and I'm wrestling through it. But I've gotten some resources that have helped me, and I want to share them with you. But it was a book called Parental Guidance Required by Andy Stanley and Reggie Joiner. It's from years ago, but the principles are still amazing, and I'd highly recommend it. But I'm taking some of the resources from there, and I appreciated them letting us use this. 3 questions to ask yourself as a parent. Number 1, what are you doing to enhance your child's relationship with you? What are you doing to enhance your child's relationship with you? Number 2, what are you doing to advance your child's relationship with God? And then number 3, what are you doing to influence your child's relationship outside the home? You see, you can't force it. You can't force these things. It takes influence. You have to build that influence into their life. And so what I want to do with the time we have left is simply walk through, how do we build that influence? What does that kind of thing look like? So I got 2 things on how to do it. Number 1, when it matters most, the quality of your relationship with your children will be determined by the weight of your influence. When it matters most, the quality of your relationship with your children will be determined by the weight of your influence. See, the temptation will be this, to use your size and position long after it's effective. And when it doesn't work, when it ceases to work, then we will naturally go to using 2 things that will only erode the relationship. What we will use as they get older and they don't listen, we will use guilt and we will use bribery. And they're not good tools. Here's the kind of things we'll say. Well, if you want to use my car, right? Hey, if you want me to pay for that college. Now, I'm not saying that they don't need to have boundaries. I'm not saying that you should not have consequences and actions, especially when they're involved in your finances and things like that, but just be careful with it. I wrote down a few more. Here's a guilt message for you. You never come to see me anymore. You know, if you were the son, you should be. If you were the daughter, you should be. Bribery. You know, I have something for you, but you need to come by the house to get it. Right? You can't have it unless you come by, right? You know what it makes our kids do as they get older? That they're only around us so they can stop feeling guilty. What do I have to do to get the guilt off? Some of us, we have parents like that, so we know the feeling, right? I got to be careful. My mom comes here, so no, I'm just playing. Right. Hey, to get the guilt off, what do we have to do? Hey, whatever I got to do to get this guilt off of me, that's what I'll do. Is that how you want the relationship to go? Or you know, hey, you got to come by here to get things. So the only thing that they're really looking for is how can I get stuff out of you? Maybe we didn't mean to set it up that way, but that's what we're doing when we use those type of tactics. That's exactly what it does. So we don't want to do that. We have to transition between size and position to relational influence. Those tactics will erode your relationship. So how do you transition between size and position? So I got 2 things that are just kind of side notes you can put under these. These are subpoints. That it's not enough just to be right. I know that's hard, especially as dads. That's why it says, dads, don't exasperate. Because we think sometimes it's just about being right. Can I tell you something, parent? You probably are right? You've been doing this a lot longer than them. We've been down a lot of the same paths as them. We probably already know. But let me ask you a question. When your parents lectured you, was it effective? It's not, is it? That it's not just about being right. And can I tell you something that we sometimes understand as leaders, we sometimes understand as managers, but we don't always understand it, especially as our kids are getting older. That sometimes we have to listen to them first before we suggest a solution. Can I tell you why that's important? Because a lot of times, I was just talking to a guy the other day, and it was amazing how that once they got it off of them, it was like, hey, the solution came to his mind even before, and oftentimes they self-correct. But we don't give them a chance to do that, right? Because we already know. And as soon as we hear it, we're very quick to rush in. We're very quick with the advice. And you got to slow it down. Does that make sense? You got to take time to listen to them and stop solving their problems because you want them to be able to, you help them with the solution, not just give them the solution. See, if you just give them the solution, one or two things is going to happen. Either one, they're going to stop talking to you because they don't want to hear you. Or two, they won't know how to make a decision without you. Are you trying to raise them up so they do? Like, this works with management too. I got a staff of people, and what I do is when my staff comes to me with a problem, we talk it over, but we let them do it. If you insert yourself into their problem, they'll never learn, right? You know, I tell my staff when they do that, what do I need you for, right? If I have to solve all of your problems, now you can come to me with advice, but they have to live and feel some of the consequences of their actions. But some of us are rescue people, right? We come in and rescue them every time there's a problem. It will never help them because we want to build them. And they can always come to us, and we can always help advise them, but be careful with the quick advice. You know the second part of that, the second subpoint? It takes time. You got to take time to listen. Stephen Covey put it this way, seek first. In his book, 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, I would recommend that book. He has 2 books like that, 7 Habits of Highly Effective People and 7 Habits of Highly Effective Families. It was a business book. He turned it into kind of a family book, but it's great principles. But he said, seek first to understand and then be understood. Do you even know where they're coming from? Oftentimes people want to know, most thing the person wants to know relationally is, are you even hearing me? He says something else in the book. You know what he says? He says, with people, fast is slow and slow is fast. You cannot be efficient with people. If you are a process person, if you're a task-oriented person, if you're an engineer, any engineers in there? Don't have to raise your hand. We already know who you are. Right? You are great. We got some of the best people in this room that have some of the most sophisticated jobs that handle processes really well, but you're terrible with people. Can I tell you why? Because you're trying to be efficient with people, and it doesn't work that way. It doesn't work that way. You got to slow it down. Stephen Covey had another book called The 8th Habit. And in The 8th Habit, one of the things that he mentioned in there was, he said, you have to model it for people. He said, you have to model it. We'll get to that in just a minute. Take time with them. A single cup of coffee conversation could change somebody's life. I know it did for me. I know it did with father figures in my life, that when I was about to make the biggest mistake of my life, just to slow it down. But you know, if you're real busy, if you're real efficient, you'll miss the biggest opportunities. They never come at the right time. Number two, when you invest in relationships with your child, you are investing in all your child's relationships. When you invest in them, you are giving them the ability to form good relationships with you. You're giving them the ability to form good relationships with God. You're giving them the ability to form good relationships outside of your home. And the biggest way you do that is you have to demonstrate it by modeling it for them. Modeling it. That's how it works, to model it. The book that I was talking about is, Stephen Covey came back and wrote an 8th habit. And in the 8th habit, the biggest thing I took from it, because it's a big, thick book, I wouldn't recommend reading the whole thing. It was really ridiculous. Stephen Covey's passed, so if he's listening, I don't think he is, but that's okay. He's a great guy. But in the 8th habit, one of the things that he said I always took was this. He said, you know what? The most effective thing is this: be a model, not a critic. Think about that. What you want them to do, model it for them. Don't just criticize what they're doing. It'll go so much further. See, if you criticize somebody, you'll be met with resistance. If you model it for them, believe me, you'll have a friend for life. You know, I remember when we were all starting to lose weight and different things like that, and you could go to other people and criticize them and you'll never change their life. But when they see you, they see the finished product for you, it's amazing how many people come to you and say, hey, what is that you're doing? Hey, how do I do that? Do you have a technique for that? And we pass the same book around to about 20 people, you know, without saying a word. Can I tell you, it works as parents. The more you lecture your younger adults, the worse it is. Let them come to you. But you got to carve out time for it, because here's what I know. More is caught than taught, you know? It's really true. You can see it more indirect than direct. And please don't think for a second that you are going to instill something in your child that you don't have. I've seen so many parents think that. They're going to be like you, what you do, not what you say. That's a fact. Can I tell you lecture doesn't work? I know that. I had one of the best dads ever, but I didn't take a lot from my dad because he lectured. And by the way, he did. He was a pastor, like me. He talked a lot, right? You know, I can't remember one of his messages. I remember how he lived, though. The good or the bad. That you're going to influence them, and so they're going to pick up the indirect part. So look at your life. You want to change something in them, maybe you got to change something in you. Two things that go along with that is this. If you got a son, spend some time on his turf. Do you synchronize with them, or they always synchronize with you? You want to get into their life and find out what their life, you got to go into their environments. You see, what I learned about my son is he's not made like me at all. He's not a big conversationalist. He doesn't even like to talk in the same environment that I like to talk. How would I talk? Well, I'll get a cup of coffee. We sit down across from each other and talk like pastors do. You know, my son, that's never worked. He's never opened up to me when we sit down like that. You know when he opened up to me? When I got a big bag of M&Ms. You laugh. But you know, I had to learn that the hard way. When my son was young, I was too harsh. I was going through a difficult time, and the way I changed behavior is I'm bigger than you, and you will change, and that was not very effective. Even when he was little, I was way too harsh. And I remember we went to somebody to see him about counsel on how do we do this. And a good friend of mine was a doctor, and she wrote a whole book on play therapy. And I remember her sitting down, and she said, John, your problem is this, is you're not allowing them time. You're not being around them. And she said, if you'll just play with him, if you'll just be around him, if you'll just get into his environment, it's amazing what he would tell me. And you know what? If I put a fishing pole in his hand, if I sit on a ski lift, you see, I'm not saying experiences are bad. I'm saying make sure you're using them to build it, because you see, in the past, what would happen is, hey man, I don't have time to talk to you right now. I'm too busy fishing, right? You know, I like to ski, so man, I don't want to talk about your life right now. I'm busy and I'm missing the most important part of life. But my question is are you taking time to get in those environments? And it don't have to cost a lot of money. But once I did, he opens up and tells me all kinds of stuff. I learned all kinds of stuff on this ski trip, right? Get on his turf. I'm telling you, it'll change your life. If you got a daughter, can I give you some advice? Date your daughter. I always thought that was a weird thing to say. It's like, and I'm not talking about creepy, okay? But what I'm talking about, and I don't mean that jokingly, but I'm saying, you know, sometimes that there are people that need to hear that. But I go, it's not creepy. What I'm talking about is this. Have you showed your daughter that she has value? Have you went to her and instilled in her, hey, you have value, and this is how a man should treat you? Or are you thinking your size and position will do it? Oh, I know, right? Oh, I got guns too. I get it. You know, boyfriend shows up and you're going to show him your gun collection, and I got a little hole out back I'll bury you in if that's a problem, right? And I just want to make sure you know it's me that you're going to face. And you think that type of influence is going to do it, but when they're out on the date, they've never seen it modeled, right? And let me tell you something, Big Dad. You won't be there in that moment. You think you will, but you won't. And some of us you think you're so strict, and I know the old country farmer and the old man, I dated a lot of those daughters. But you know the only person that'll stand up to you is somebody like you, believe me. Is that what you want? They have no idea how they should be treated because they've never been shown. Stop all the bravado and get with them so that they can see how a real man treats a woman, how they treat them with respect, how they take them to nice places, how they treat them so that when they're in that situation, they go, hey, I've seen that modeled. This isn't a man. This isn't what I want. Do you do that? Because believe me, you won't be there in the moment that they need you most because you never took the time to show them. So important. Okay. So I want to give you two takeaways. Two takeaways as we wrap up today. The first thing is this: if you want a great relationship with your kids, number one, make them feel accepted. You know, when I first saw this came from Andy Stanley, so if you're watching, I'm just playing. He's never called me yet, but that's okay. I've been to his church, but he's never come to mine, but that's okay, whatever. Make them feel accepted. When I first saw that, I thought, that's kind of psychobabble. I'm not that type of person. Make them feel accepted. But the more I thought about it, the more it's true. I want to make sure you get what making them feel accepted is and what it is not. What it is not is meaning that you agree with everything that they do. What it is not is it doesn't mean that you don't challenge them or that you enable them or that you bribe them or you manipulate them. It doesn't mean any of that. It doesn't mean that, hey, you just sit back and watch them go down a bad path. That's not what we're talking about. What we're talking about is this, is did you know that you can disagree with somebody and still accept them? That person can know that my dad, my mom is with me no matter what. That they love me right where I am and too much to leave me there. That I always am accepted by them even if they don't agree with the things that I'm doing. And I want to give you a precedence for that. When Jesus was asked what God was like, if you turn to Luke chapter 15, you can read that for yourself. And you will see a story where God describes what he's like. And he tells the story of the prodigal son. You read it for yourself and you tell me. God didn't enable. God is not an enabler. He didn't go to the pig pen of life where the guy went after he messed up his whole life, but he was there when the son came back, right? Is that the kind of parent you are? Are you busy trying to make your point? See? Because you don't realize life is connected. You're frustrated. I'm just asking you to lean into it. I'm telling you, there's something about somebody that's in your corner. I remember when my dad died. I remember there'll never be another man that will ever love you like that. I remember that. But can I tell you, that happens for some of us that have lost parents. But those of us that haven't lost parents, can you make sure they know it while you're still alive? But the part that's really going to be important with that is, number one, is that you make them feel accepted. But number two, you got to carve out the time. Because life is busy, did you know? And it goes by like that, doesn't it? And I know how important all these things are, but do you know where you're going to get the time for this? You might have to sacrifice lifestyle for a life. That's what I'm telling you. I know what you're doing. It's the same thing I do. If I could just give my kids this experience, that's why I'm working so hard, right? But can I tell you something? You're working for the wrong thing. You think it's important, but can I tell you something? I know some people that are millionaires. And can I tell you, their kids are no happier than yours. Some of them are. It doesn't matter if you have money or don't have money. Money can be actually an obstacle some to this. Did you know that? That some of the people that I know that have the best relationships, they didn't have a lot of the great experiences that I've had to get to have. They haven't had a lot of the experiences that me and my son have got to have together. Be careful. Be careful you don't think the experience will do more than the relationship. Be careful that you're not teaching your kids that what they need most in crisis isn't to lean into relationships, but to lean into stuff. I had a list at the beginning and I forgot to read it, but I think this would be good to read for you. When people come in my office that are having problems, can I tell you what I've never heard? I've never heard anybody say, you know, it all started when I didn't make that soccer team when I was in 7th grade. You know, I never heard that. Is that being a problem in their life? I never heard I didn't get my first choice in college. I didn't get to go to Harvard. Let's put it in our terms. I didn't get to go to Virginia Tech. I didn't get that PlayStation that one Christmas, and man, I tell you what, it just messed up my life. My dad made me drive a used car, and that was the time that my life just fell apart, right? I haven't heard that. I didn't get to wear all the designer clothes. I missed a baseball game. I didn't get to play travel ball. I haven't heard any of that. You know what I hear, though? Relationship. I'm telling you, be careful what you're giving your life to. And the way you got to do it is this. You got to make sure they know they're accepted. And you got to carve out the time. Now, before I close, I want to talk to one last person, and then we're going to pray. The person that's messed this up. And if that's you, then I want to just say, you are so welcome here. We are not here today to push you down. And we're not here today to say there is no hope. If you've messed this up, I truly believe there's hope, and I want to give you some encouragement today from God of things that might help. 2 things that might help you. The first one is this. If you want to rebuild that relationship with your kids, maybe one that you've never had, the first thing I would tell you is this, is pray. The effective, fervent prayers of a righteous man availeth much. Maybe you're not righteous. Maybe it means you need to get some help. Next week, we're going to talk about what church family has to do with all this. So come back. because you need more than just your immediate family. You're going to need us. And if you need us in this, let us pray. You know, the effective, fervent prayers that it talks about in the book of James, it's not you praying, it's somebody praying for you. Do you have that? You can't do this alone. Pray. You know what prayer also means? It means you have to pause. You see, because what we want to do is we want to act. Hey, man, I heard this great message, and I want to go to my kid, and I want to tell him, hey, man, I heard this great message, and you need to forgive me. And then they come back to me and say, hey, that stuff you talked about didn't work. Yeah, I know, because it takes time. You didn't break this overnight, and you won't undo it overnight, and your kid has a part in it, especially if they're a young adult. But you're going to go to them, and then all of a sudden it'll be like, well, hey, if you want this stuff, you better come see me, right? Hey, if you want this, hey, by the way, you should forgive me because of whatever. You got to give them time, and you got to let God do it. So what else can I do? And let me tell you something. I believe this is modeled by Jesus. If you want to rebuild that relationship, you know how you do it? You serve your way back in. Not bribe. Not manipulate, not guilt trip, but serving them honestly from a humble heart that says, I want to model this. I want to help you. I care more about you than how I feel about it. See, if it's you trying to get something from them, that's codependence. I need you to need me. I need you to want me. I need you to do this because you're not thinking about them. What you need to think about is what are they going to be like when I'm no longer here? How can I instill this in them? How can I be the best influence that I possibly can for their life? And the way you do that is you look for the ability to serve them at the most important times. You know how I know it? Because I saw it modeled for me. I want to tell you just a personal story, and then we're done. The story I want to tell you about is the story of my father-in-law. Some of you guys have met him. If you knew him, then you wouldn't be surprised that when Marie was growing up that he could be exasperating. Sorry. And if he's watching, sorry, Roger. No, I'm just playing. I'm not sorry. Sorry, not sorry, right? Because that is who you are. And you know it, right? I mean, he knows he is. My father-in-law did not have the best childhood. He basically raised himself, and then he joined the Navy. And he found a home in the Navy. You have to understand that about him. He had a lot of dysfunction in the home that he grew up in. And so when he found the Navy, he found a home because it was like, hey, I do this and I get this. And he was a man that pulled himself up by his own bootstraps. He went from enlisted to being an aviator to being a commander in the Navy. He's quite accomplished. And he was a very great leader. And I learned a lot about leadership from him. But as a parent, he was a little bit exasperating. He didn't understand. My wife's difficult, if you didn't know. I didn't know you were going to be sitting right there, but that's fine. But he was. And I want to be clear about something that I want to make sure you know, that while he was like that, some of you guys know my wife struggled from sexual abuse when she was a child. It was nobody in her family, and it definitely was not him, so it wasn't that problem. And I just want to be clear about that because we've shared our story very openly. But they struggled growing up, and they didn't have the best relationship, and a piece of it was that. But I got to tell you, after she moved out and we got married, and the way I met Roger, it was kind of funny because I met him when I proposed after I proposed to Marie. I didn't do things in the correct order necessarily. I proposed to Marie, and then I thought I probably should talk to him, and I'd never met him, and so I went over to his house, and I was like. All I knew about him was he had just gotten back from Desert Storm, Desert Shield. He flew helicopters for Navy SEALs. And I thought, this is going to be very unpleasant, right? I remember him bringing me up into his office, and he could tell I was nervous. And he said, you know what? I only want to tell you one thing about marriage. He said, there's a no return policy. And that's all he said. And then after I married Marie, I knew what he meant. No, I'm just playing. No. Marie hates it. She hates it when I say that. But he was great. And then not long after we got married, then a baby came along, right? And then when we had a baby, then Marie struggled with postpartum depression, and then this stuff about the sexual abuse came up in her life, and our life literally fell apart, and we didn't know what we were going to do. She became suicidal. It was bad, and I only mention that because of what happened next. That Susan, my mother-in-law, she's a great godly woman, and she's so loving. But that's not who I want to talk to you about today. I want to talk to you about Roger. Roger came to me as man to man, and he said, I want you to come stay with us if you want to. By the way, I had a lot of pride, but I didn't have a lot of resources left. We were going to lose our house. That was a fact. And he came to me and he was like, he knew I made a lot of mistakes, but see, Roger was the type person, you pull yourself up by your own bootstraps. He was not the type person that he would be like, hey, if you got a problem, you solve it, right? But he came alongside me and he nurtured me. And he invited us into his home. And he repaired his relationship with his daughter. And we stayed there a long time, 6 years. We weren't easy to be around, but I got to tell you something. He really took the time. And while we were there, Marie's grandma got injured, and her grandparents lived with us as well. And I watched them model how to take care of people. And he served his way back in and repaired his relationship with his daughter. The part I want you to understand today is this. If it wasn't for Roger, I would not have moved in there. And if it wasn't for us moving in there, I don't think we would be here today. Now, me and Marie have never thought about getting divorced. That's something we not had. But I will tell you this, that what she was going through, about 90% of marriages like ours ended in divorce. I know, because I've read a lot about that. That 75% of people that were facing what Marie had commit suicide. But she's here today. She's better today. You don't see that side of it today. And in a very small part because the father-in-law served his way back in. It's important, guys. It will change your life. Can I pray for you today? Let's stand for prayer. Father God, we come before you today, and Lord, I thank you so much for your word. Just the one phrase there, don't exasperate. Instead, nurture. Help us with that, Lord. We're all parents in this room. God, I pray for the biological parents. God, I pray for the caregivers. I pray for the step families. I pray for the ones that aren't related at all, but yet they have influence in a child's life. Maybe the parent can't be there. Maybe they're a grandparent. Maybe there's somebody else in a child's life, and it's not what we would consider normal, but it doesn't matter. You don't care about any of that, Lord. We have the ability to influence. We have the ability to model, no matter how messed up that we've made this. So God, help us with that. Lord, there's one thing I know about this church, and I didn't even have to say it. That there's people in this room that maybe don't love God, but they definitely love their kids. There's people in this room, Lord, that they might have messed up everything else, but the one thing they want to get right is with their kids, and I know that. But God, we are missing it. We're trying. We're trying to give them things that aren't going to fix it. The truth is, the reason why we're doing it is we think those things would fix us, and they won't. The only thing that can fix us is you. So I hope that we'll help with that, Lord. It starts with us. And we can't give our kids something we don't have. We can't model something we're not doing. Help us, Lord. Right now, today. Lord, some of us, we don't know how to do this. And I pray that parent knows right now, Lord, they are not alone in this. We have a church family that's here to love and support them. Next week, we're going to talk about church is not an organization. God, it is a family. And we're here to help. I pray that we will. So God, I pray, be God in that situation. Help them to reach out to you because, Lord, they can't get it right without you. If they don't know you as their Savior, Lord, I pray they call out to you today. And that you'll come in and change their life. And through that, Lord, I believe you'll change their whole family. God, I pray for the one that's struggling. They don't have a clue what to do next. I pray, God, help them to see this. I pray for those of us that are so busy doing the things that don't matter that we wake up to it. Lord, where we carve out the time is we might have to change a lifestyle. We might have to change where we live. We might have to change some of the activities that we do so we can enhance these relationships while there's still time. But I know this, Lord, it will always be worth it. That no matter what we give up, Lord, there's no sacrifice too big for that relationship and influence. I know it from my life. I know it from the people that invested in me, and I thank you for them, Lord, the men and the women and the mothers and the fathers that have invested in my life. Many of them gone now. But yet, God, it changed my life. I know I wouldn't be here without it. Lord, I'm not so sure we would even be alive without it. I thank you for them. God, I pray, raise us up to do that. I pray a change happens in this room, not an overnight thing, not an instant thing, but a process that changes the lives of our children, Lord. Please help us with that. We'll give you all the honor and glory and praise. In Jesus' name, amen. Guys, if you need prayer, we'll be here after the service. For everybody else, God bless you. Have a great week.